So good morning, everybody. As Ron mentioned, I'm Ryan Wheeler, based out of Albany, New York, and coming from National Grid, our clean transportation team. So I lead our fleet electrification offerings for our customers in New York and Massachusetts. As Ron mentioned, National Grid is focused primarily in the Northeast, with New York and Massachusetts, and we also have UK operations, but I'll be focusing on the US today. So National Grid has a strong commitment to clean energy, as we'll talk about this morning. But specifically for clean transportation is more than 45% of the greenhouse gas emissions in the Northeast, and a leading cause of air pollution. Right, so air pollution has a huge public health impact, as well as all the greenhouse gas emissions impact. And so our guiding principles are to really provide a clean environment and reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. We also want to provide equitable transportation across all customer types. So we'll talk a lot about that as we go through the slides here this morning. But clean transportation is a right for everybody. So that includes the residential sector, but also public access charging for everyone to be able to access that, as well as things like public transit and school buses, which we have very large programs to support. We're also very extremely focused on the smart grid, smart integration of grid-tied vehicles. So, making sure that we get customer savings, we maximize the current infrastructure we have, but also, make sure that we're gearing towards a smart investment plan for the future. So New York and Massachusetts are relatively lucky to be two of the states that have signed on to very significant zero-emission vehicle targets. Both in New York and Massachusetts. So as Ron mentioned, we're going from the single digits of EV adoption here today to very, very quickly much larger levels of adoption in New York and Massachusetts. So National Grid has developed a lot of programs to support that. So for National Grid in New York and Massachusetts, we've had a program in New York. Well, we've had programs in both of our states for a while, but we've had a major program in New York for a couple, 3 years. And recently, a couple months ago, we got approval for a substantial program in Massachusetts as well. So all told, we have $350 million of EV programs to enable electric vehicles across our two states. So the way we think about it is in three different customer segments. So our primary, most of the funding goes towards public and workplace programs. So this is essentially getting public charging access out there for everyone. So limited public charging is the biggest barrier for EV adoption, right? So you think about range anxiety and replacing the gas station model. Getting public and workplace chargers out there is a really big barrier to get people to buy EVs. And the reason we have programs in place is because the upfront cost is very prohibitive for a lot of site hosts and customers that would want to install charging stations. So we provide the incentives to be able to get the poles and wires to the site itself, but also in certain areas incentives for the charger itself. On the residential side, we've had a lot of really interesting programs lately that have been approved. So we provide charging access, but also enable EV ownership for residential customers. This is a really crucial segment where home access, home charging is about 80% of EV charging today. So enabling those customers to have giving those customers incentives is a huge barrier to be able to get a lot more drivers on the road. And then finally, the fleet programs. So, especially for, I mentioned equitable access to clean transportation. About 20% of our low and moderate income customers don't own vehicles. And so they're relying on public transportation, to get around. But there's also, the equitable access to clean transportation for goods and services, right? So if you think about a delivery truck or a U.S. Postal Service truck, those are going to everybody, whether you own an EV or not. And so we've really ramped up our efforts to enable clean air and clean transportation for all customers through those segments. So I'm going to walk through each of those segments with some high-level slides to be able to talk through those three segments individually. So again, it's public and workplace, residential, and fleet. So, it's a little bit complicated because we have some slight differences between each state, between New York and Massachusetts. But New York in 2020 had a $700 million statewide program, which was the largest EV program outside of California. So National Grid got a very big chunk of that, which has been fantastic. We've seen a lot of really great progress so far since this EV order came out. So for the commercial Make Ready program, so that's the public and workplace program, we have a target of 16,000 charging plugs across our territory. The state has a goal of 50,000 plugs, but within National Grid, we're shooting for 16,000 plugs. There's also fleet services, which is helping fleets understand their site feasibility assessment, as well as a rate analysis for them to understand how their operations are going to change once they electrify. We also got $5 million for transit agencies. So going back to that equitable access to clean transportation, we're supporting transit agencies in our territory to enable 25% of 25% electrification by 2025. And there's also a substantial medium and heavy duty pilot program, which for all the vehicles that are above 10,000 pounds, we've got $6 million to enable their electrification as well. The way it works for public and workplace charging, the way we kind of think about it in 3 buckets for equipment, right? So there's the utility side infrastructure of the entire distribution network. That's the poles and the wires. And then on the customer side of the meter, there's the conduits, the trenching, and the conductors and the panel itself for EV service. There's also the EV station itself. So that's the EVSE. And those have traditionally been funded through other mechanisms in New York. NYSERDA is hopefully going to be getting a little bit more funding there to enable more funding for the charger itself. So National Grid's Make Ready program covers the purple shade there, the Make Ready components, where depending on the customer type, we can fund up to 50%, 90%, or 100% of the Make Ready infrastructure for these customers. We also support the customers as they think about the EVSE hardware, but also the other soft costs around the networking capability, the maintenance fees, that sort of thing. Just to touch quickly on the eligibility, and this is something that really varies by state across the country. But in New York, we've been allowed to provide a tiered incentive level here. So for public projects that are within disadvantaged communities, we can fund up to 100%. For public projects that are anywhere, we can fund up to 90%. And then non-public charging for either a workplace or for a pay-to-park lot, we can fund up to 50%. So this is where we work with the site host or whoever wants to install the EV charging and walk through these these types of tiers to get more EV charging out there into the marketplace. Now, I mentioned at the top that recently, at the beginning of the year, we got approval for a $200 million EV charging program in Massachusetts. So from a commercial standpoint, there's 4 main buckets, and this is really exciting for our Massachusetts customers. So there's the first piece is the public and workplace charging program, which is very, very similar to the New York program, with the added benefit that we do have approval for EVSE rebates, so we can give funding for the charger itself, but we can also give a networking stipend, so so that the data from the charger can come back to National Grid, and we can do an analysis on the utilization of that charger, the fees that are being charged to drivers, that kind of thing. Also very exciting is we got funding for a co-located energy storage. So a lot of major urban areas in our territory have significant capacity constraints, and so we got approval for co-located energy storage, which allows high capacity fast charging to be deployed in those urban environments where DCEFC is really necessary, and we can support up to 5 customer sites to really get a better understanding of the economics, the deployment, and how those types of projects can work to support those projects. Because if you think about an urban environment where a grid upgrade is going to be very expensive, today developers are tending to shy away from those types of projects, and so we think that getting energy storage can really enable high speed DC fast charging in those urban environments that need it today, not 3 to 5 years from now. Multi-unit dwellings, we have two exciting offerings there as well, where with MEDs that have 5+ units, we can do make-ready infrastructure, so the utility side and customer side incentives. But we can also do EVSE and networking rebates for EJC communities. So really exciting offering there for multi-unit housing units. We've also been approved for EV-ready site plans for multi-unit housing. So for sites that have 20+ units, we can do an EV-ready site plan, which essentially is doing a no-cost assessment of how you can get EV charging for your site, and what that means in terms of contacting developers, doing the construction, what's the physical layout of those sites, etc. So a really exciting program, especially when you think about home ownership is a big barrier, as well as not owning where you park is another big barrier for getting EV drivers to electrify. And so accelerating this segment for multi-unit housing is a really, really big deal for the state of Massachusetts.
Do you have any ideas on how National Grid might work with organizations, not just in the upfront installation configuration, but also in the ongoing support, ongoing analysis? Do you share any best practices on, well, I've got this installed, how do I refine it?
Yeah, absolutely. So the ongoing cost is certainly crucial. So that's where maybe I glossed over it, but a big part of the services that we provide for both New York and Massachusetts is really understanding that what's your new rate going to be. What are some of the other soft costs that come in for managing and owning these stations? So that includes the operations and maintenance, but also association fees or networking fees, that kind of thing. So we really help both developers and site hosts themselves understand what those costs are going to be. From a rates standpoint, there's a couple different initiatives going on there that are pretty exciting. So in Massachusetts, we have something called a demand charge alternative, which has been seen in other states as well. But that's being developed to provide basically a discount on your demand charge, depending on the utilization of that charger. So depending on how much reading you do on the demand charge, impact. If you've got EV charging on your site that's relatively low utilized, it can really have a big impact on your demand charge. If it's even if just one EV is charged on your site, you get you get billed for that kilowatts of capacity. And so in Massachusetts, we're developing a demand charge alternative, which under a certain threshold of utilization, then you get a discount on that demand charge. So that really helps lower the economics for either a site host or a developer. Just to provide a little bit more detail on the demand charge alternative in Massachusetts. So, it's about the load factor threshold, right? So if you're less than 5% of a load factor, you can get a 100% demand charge discount. Less than 10%, 75% discount, and less than 15%, you can get a 50% discount. So that's a pretty important discount for folks. So if you're a service station that has one or two chargers and it's getting used once or twice a month, then your load factor is going to be very, very low. So you'll fall into that 100 or 75% discount for the demand charge. So that's a really, really big deal. Really helps the economics for installing those charging stations. And again, as Ron mentioned, we've definitely have lots of folks to talk through how all this stuff works, if people have questions. Question, Kevin. We've got a couple links here, and as Ron mentioned, we'll be able to share those around. But for Massachusetts, we actually just went live with our new website for the commercial EV charging program. So we have a step-by-step process that's identified there about how to find an installer, how to get the incentives, how to apply to the program. All of those things are neatly laid out there. So we'll be able to, if you give me a couple minutes, I'll put the link in the chat as well. But can also follow up on the slides. A few things to highlight on the residential side. So I mentioned that getting EV drivers on the road is the main goal here. And so in New York, we've been approved for a pretty exciting program, which is essentially a subscription plan for EV drivers. So there's a couple different tiers where you pay a fixed dollar amount per month, and it really helps simplify things for customers. So they don't have to talk the language of kilowatt hours. They don't have to talk about different pricing tiers. It's essentially the same way you pay for Netflix or streaming service. You pay for your EV service based on just two tiers of use. So that's going to be going live in the next few months here, and so that's going to be a really great program for New York EV drivers. We're actually in the testing phase for National Grid employees at this point to be able to get some of the feedback on how the program works, how you enroll, and that kind of thing. But it's a really interesting program that's we think is going to really move things forward for the state. And for Massachusetts, we've got some really exciting programs for residential customers in Massachusetts as well. So again, I know this is a bit of a commercial focused audience, but the vehicles charge most of their time at home, whether you own your home or not. And so these programs help enable that. So in Massachusetts, we got approval for make-ready infrastructure for residential EV charging. So we can provide up to $700 for a single-family house or $1,400 for a 2 to 4 family house to install the 240-volt electrical service in their house. So that's a really big win for residential customers in Massachusetts. We also, for low-income rate customers, we're providing a turnkey installation service. So essentially, kind of a full suite of services to help enable those 240-volt costs for installing an EV charging system in your home. Similar to what we're talking about for a commercial customer in terms of the ongoing costs, we also have a really cool EV off-peak rebate program. So for residential chargers, we've got a system in place and an app in place that allows customers to get a discount for all their charging that they do overnight. So when they come home or when they charge publicly, if they have a telematics enabled vehicle, they can get a 3 cents per kilowatt hour discount in the winter and a 5 cents per kilowatt hour discount in the summer. Yeah, and just to touch quickly on the fleet side of things, this is a little bit closer to home for me. But why do we focus on fleets? So fleets have a very significant impact when you think about the per vehicle costs for electrifying those. So from a CO2 perspective, they're 8 to 30 times the amount of CO2 emissions per vehicle. So if you install one charger for a fleet vehicle, you're going to get up to 30 times the amount of CO2 savings for that one charger. From a health standpoint, it's even larger. So the particulate matter emissions from things like transit buses and school buses and garbage trucks are 30 to 150 times the amount of air pollution. So especially when you think about all those vehicles traveling through environmental justice communities and disadvantaged communities, it's really crucial from a public health perspective to be able to electrify these vehicles as soon as possible. And then from an equity standpoint, if we think about the source of these funds for these programs is coming from all, essentially in most cases from all ratepayers. And so we want to make sure that all ratepayers are seeing these public health and public transportation benefits. So from a cost of ownership perspective, we've seen some really fabulous results from our what we call our fleet advisory services. So we've completed 55 fleet assessments in Massachusetts, and we've identified $200 million of lifetime cost savings for those customers. So they're starting that plan to electrify all of those to electrify those vehicles in those studies. So you think about like the cost. These are entities that would not be doing this without our help, and administering this program is about $2 million, and we're finding $200 million of savings for these public fleets in Massachusetts. We've kind of already touched on this, but for fleets in particular, there's a really significant kind of learning curve or a customer journey here, where you have to navigate the utility, which is typically a little bit of a messy process, but we're doing everything we can to make that seamless for customers to come into the fold at National Grid, so we can help plan for your EV adoption, but also the EV infrastructure. We have programs in place to install the infrastructure itself. We have rebates in place for the charger, and then can help identify, whether it's a federal program or a state program, find those vehicle rebates to be able to electrify those vehicles. And then, so I know because it's extremely exciting times. School buses are a particular focus for us. So we've been doing a lot of things around vehicle to grid integration. So this picture here is our vehicle to grid project in Beverly, Massachusetts. We've been partnering with a lot of different companies, including Highland, to be able to get those types of projects deployed, not only in Massachusetts but also in New York. New York has a 100% zero emission school bus goal by 2027. So we are doing a across the state effort to understand exactly where all those buses are parked, what grid capacity is available for each of those, for all those buses, and then prioritizing those sites to be able to hit that goal by 2027. So just to give an understanding of what we do for fleets in the New York area, we basically look at the grid for their fleet and do a site feasibility and a rate analysis, including estimating their billing impacts and a recommendation for what they should do to electrify their fleet. We closely align with the Clean School Bus program from the EPA. So we can support everything on the grid side of the meter, and then the EPA program can support everything on the customer side of the meter for these school buses to electrify. And then similarly, I mentioned in January, we got approval for a significant fleet program in Massachusetts. So we have $30 million to deploy EV charging infrastructure for public and private fleets. That includes the infrastructure as well as the charger itself for public fleets. We also got approval to expand significantly our fleet advisory services. So we originally got approval for 100 fleets, but now we can do 275 publicly owned fleet customers. So we hope that to really scale up to thousands of vehicles in our territory in the next few years. We also got approval to expand the off-peak charging program to fleet vehicles. So 1,000 vehicles can participate in this offering. So you think about a delivery company or a mom and pop shop that's driving all day and charging at night. This is a really, really advantageous program for them to lower their operating costs of switching to an electric vehicle. Yeah, so I think that's pretty much the end of the discussion here today. I did want to just highlight here about in terms of contacting the utility early. A lot of these fleet customers are public charging sites. These loads are going from a very small electrical load to a very, very large electrical load. A lot of depending on your white paper that you're reading, these highway charging sites or these fleet sites are going to be essentially as large as something like the Empire State Building, where right now they're in a couple hundred kilowatt range. Now they're going to be in tens of megawatts. So for the utilities to plan for these types of load, the number one thing is to contact the utility as quickly as possible, because these loads they're going to require significant grid side upgrades, but also the customer side upgrades are potentially long lead times as well. And so it's an important conversation to have with the utility as quickly as possible. So Ron, I think I'll obviously everybody will have access to these links and contact info to be able to get more information. But maybe we can pause there and answer more questions. We do have plug-in hybrids as part of that fleet assessment service. So if you think about essentially the goal of that program is to transition as quickly as possible to 100% zero emission vehicles. But for specific use cases, public hybrid, plug-in hybrids can come into play. But what's really interesting is that for a lot of those, I mentioned the $200 million in total cost of ownership savings. For all vehicle classes in Massachusetts, we've actually seen more than 50% of the vehicles that are assessed are a cheaper option to go battery electric vehicles than a diesel or other gasoline option. So, and that's with the vehicles that are available today. So, really, really impactful things, and that's the kind of thing that customers don't have at their disposal today. So, that program really has a lot of value for, especially like a municipal fleet or another regional transit authority that doesn't have the resources available today to do that analysis. We can come back to them and saying, for 50% of your routes, you can electrify today, and then in the next few years, you'll be able to electrify the rest of them.
AJ, did that answer your question? You can speak or just get in the chat.
It did. Thank you. Thanks for the clarification. That's what I was looking for is,
Yeah.
as you transition, for sure, from a time and cost perspective, not everything can be migrated to EV in a short time frame, right? So
Yes.
that's what we are also looking. We have a huge fleet, and what's a good interim path? And you did answer that question. Thank you.
Again, if
Yeah,
people
great.
have more,
I failed to mention at the beginning that National Grid's internal fleet is also electrifying as soon as we can. We've signed on to the EV 100. We have zero emission goals for 100% of our light duty fleet by 2030, and a big portion of our medium and heavy duty fleet by 2030 as well. And then by 2050, 100% of the whole fleet. So yeah, so we're kind of going through those types of analysis for our own internal fleet as well. So things like the big utility bucket trucks are, going to be, we're experimenting with a lot of different options there, including some hybrid drivetrains. For that exact reason that we're pushing the manufacturers to come out with the fully electric, but for some of those much larger vehicle classes, it may be another, few cycles before those vehicles make sense to fully electrify.
Yep, that's the situation we are in. Great. Thank you so much.
great. One other question, and Brent, I'm going to also allow you, if you can, to speak. Brent, we can answer more detailed a question about how do you go about creating these self-contained energy sourcing capabilities, maybe with photovoltaic cells, batteries, et cetera. Again, a lot of that is going to be site specific because the amount of photovoltaic cells in terms of square that you need to charge an EV, especially if you're looking at level 3 charging, it's a lot of space. So you have to be aware of that. You have to look at the cost and feasibility of not only real estate, but the interconnect, batteries. You have to look at, well, what's the lighting and things like that. So I believe it will really just require a site-by-site specific. There's really no common answer. But Brett, if you want to speak yourself, just unmute yourself and you could add more detail for your specific situation.
Yeah, thank you. You answered part of the question. I was mostly speaking just asking the question from the perspective of the national grid and how grid operators are working to integrate those types of distributed solutions where they make sense. And understand, it's going to be site specific, but just wondering what's happening in the Northeast and what kind of work is being done there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, at the next piece, we'll talk a little bit more about the clean energy side, but yeah, I mean, I think so distributed solar has been a huge part of National Grid's offerings. Unfortunately, I don't have the most robust stats at the top of my head about how many projects in megawatts, et cetera, but it's significant. But from a integration with EVs perspective, we definitely have a lot of developers that are doing those types of projects, whether it's for a public EV charging site or for a little bit more like a fleet, an EV charging hub type deployment. Yeah, and so I mentioned here for Massachusetts, we got approval for co-located energy storage, which is going to be huge to be able to get basically not require a grid upgrade to be able to get EV charging, which is a big help. And we've also the New York Department of Public Service recently came out with a white paper that is recommending a change to our EV program to also allow energy storage. So that should really pair up energy storage to be able to get peak reduction for those EV charging loads. Yeah, and so yeah, I think yeah. So maybe I just saw a question from Roman. So yeah, so we Massachusetts we've got approval for that, and then in New York, hopefully in the next few months or up to we expect a new order this summer to be able to apply to New York that would allow for battery integrated DCFC to be eligible. Right now, the DCFC is eligible. The battery doesn't receive funding, but the DCFC itself can still receive that make-ready funding. But the Department of Public Service is recommending to shift some of those resources towards integrated battery storage.